So I've been asked to speak about the political crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is ongoing, and what this means for good governance and the rule of law in that country. And I think that the key point to understand here is that the crisis in Congo is very grave. It's a very serious situation, and there is a very high risk of violence in the months to come. For those of you who may not be familiar with the situation, the short story is that elections were due to happen this November. The president's constitutionally mandated term in office expires on the 19th of December. And due to some failures of the government to properly organize to hold elections, including holding a very badly needed census that could be used to update the voter rolls, the country has not organized elections for next month, and this failure has provoked protests for several months. The Superior Court has ruled that the president can stay in office indefinitely until elections are held. And many civilians have rejected that decision. The Congolese constitution limits the president to 2 terms in office, and the clause in the constitution, so the actual section in the constitution about this provision, says this provision may not be amended. So the Constitution not only prohibits the president from staying in office beyond his 2 terms, it also prohibits him from changing the Constitution or from any other politician doing so. So there have been major protests. There has been some violence, although low-level violence in the cities, and there has been a dialogue process going on, and that produced an agreement last week that will delay the elections until 2018. Now, it's important to understand this agreement is unconstitutional, but at this point it is logistically impossible to organize elections in time for the deadline, and it is probably logistically impossible to hold them before the planned date in 2018. There is a lot that needs to be done, particularly the census. There are several million people who have died since the last time the voter rolls were updated, and there are many other people who have turned 18 and are eligible to vote. So it is necessary to do a census prior to the elections in order for them to be free and fair. So there is no broad consensus about this agreement, however. It was negotiated by some of the opposition groups, but not all of the opposition parties. And there are many actors in Congo's civil society who disagree and are speaking out and organizing protests against the agreement. Some civil society organizations are still pushing for elections to be held next month. That's not going to happen, but that's their position. And perhaps most importantly, the Catholic bishops, who are one of the most important constituencies in the country, would like elections to take place in 2017. So they understand that a delay is necessary, but they would like them to happen in about a year. And the other danger, of course, is that the opposition has largely united, and they've united around the question of wanting President Kabila to leave. But even if Kabila does leave, even if he does follow his constitutional duty to depart office, there's still very serious danger in Congo. And I think it's important to understand that even if everything goes according to the best scenario possible, there is still grave danger, and that is because the opposition will fragment. The opposition is not strong enough to stay united without the common cause of opposing Kabila. And if they do fragment, because President Kabila's party changed the Constitution in 2010 for the 2011 elections, it is not necessary to win a majority of the vote. It is only necessary to win a plurality. So it is only necessary to win the most votes. And what this means is that someone could conceivably be elected with only 10% or 15% of the vote in Congo. This could be a completely free and fair election, and someone could win with only a very small percentage of the population blocking him. That will lead to a legitimacy crisis, and that legitimacy crisis opens the door to all kinds of other problems: political instability, violence by armed groups, possible coup attempts in the Congolese military. It's a very grave and dire situation. So I think it's important to understand that the main impediments to good governance and adherence to the rule of law in Congo right now are the country's weak institutions. And these weak institutions are part of every sector in the political realm. So political institutions are weak, the parties are weak, the opposition has united, but again, that's only because they have a common enemy for the moment. And when that common enemy goes away, they will not remain united. There are few checks and balances on the government's power. The government might pass laws, it might not, but the laws are unevenly applied. Police do not respect the rule of law. They do not respect human rights of civilians, and abuses are skyrocketing against political enemies of the state. Economically, institutions are also weak. The vast majority of Congolese still live in dire poverty, and people do not have economic opportunities. And I know that's common in many countries across the African continent, but in Congo it is particularly grave, and the level of poverty and the number of people who experience that high level of poverty is vast. In the security sector, security forces in Congo are increasingly repressive. They are getting stronger. I've been studying the security forces in Congo for a little over 10 years, and they are becoming more professionalized, more capable of doing their job. But because there are no checks and balances on their power, there's nothing to restrain them from abusing civilians. I have a new academic study I'm working on that is showing that as these institutions get stronger, as the police get stronger, as the army gets stronger, they are using that strength to be more repressive against civilians, and particularly against journalists, against civil society actors, against human rights activists, against opposition party members. Anyone who dares to speak out against the government is being targeted for violence. And so there are a lot of implications for this. I only have 15 minutes. I can't possibly cover them all. But I would like to talk a bit about the crisis in the East, which is perhaps most at risk in this current situation, a situation where an already bad situation could get much, much worse. It's incorrect to speak of what goes on in the east of Congo as a conflict. It is not one conflict. It is many, many conflicts. And most of these conflicts are over very small local issues, micro-level issues, conflicts over land, conflicts over citizenship rights, conflicts over identity. These are crises that have only very tenuous ties to the national or international political situation or to regional political situations. Now, there are some that are connected to Congo's neighbors, that are connected to broader issues, but the vast majority of the 75 or so armed groups that operate in Eastern Congo are quite small groups and fighting over very small questions. It will take decades to resolve these crises, even without a major political crisis in Kinshasa centering around the elections. Each of these situations requires intensive local peace-building efforts, doing the hard work of helping people talk to each other, helping them come to resolution over difficult questions like who has the right to a particular piece of land, whose family owns this piece versus that piece, whose plot is whose. And there is a danger, though, if the political crisis in Kinshasa escalates, and if politicians from the East or the big men, the powerful men who may or may not be politicians, if they reject the compromise, or if the election happens, there's a legitimacy crisis and they reject the results of the election, some of these men can easily raise militias. They have either headed militias in the past, or they can call on members of their ethnic group, members of their geographic community to fight for their cause. Or they can just use the political chaos to take advantage of the situation to fight over local level issues that they have been wanting to settle through violence. So it's very, very important that local and regional actors, as well as the international community, support local peace-building efforts and encourage populations not to respond to calls for this kind of violence. The last thing that I've been asked to speak about is what roles the international and continental institutions that are interested in Eastern Congo and the region in general can play to ensure a peaceful and credible resolution to the crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I will tell you, I have to be quite critical of my own government here. I think that the United States made, and other powerful Western donors made, two critical errors with respect to democracy in Congo and in Central Africa more broadly. The first mistake was letting President Kabila get away with stealing the 2011 election. The 2011 elections in Congo were not free, fair, or credible. We don't actually know who won or lost the election because the results were announced before the ballots were counted. But certainly there are reasons to believe that Mr. Kabila did not win. And more importantly, whatever the reality of the vote is, a large percentage of the population, far more than 50%, does not believe he won. So perception is often more important than reality. I think you know what I'm saying, yeah? And when perception is more important than reality, people do not believe that he legitimately won. The United States, some of our allies, particularly our European allies, believed that they knew Kabila, that they could work with Kabila. They were not interested in having a political crisis in Congo in 2011. And so they allowed him to stay. They allowed him to claim victory with the caveat that he had to take more action in the East to settle some of the armed conflicts there. That's how we got the resolution of a crisis that popped up later, the M23 crisis in 2012 and 2013. But this sent a signal. There were reasons to do this in the short term, but it sent a signal to the president that he could get away with undemocratic behavior, and that there would be no real or meaningful consequences from the donors. And so there we are. The second critical mistake has been allowing leaders in Congo's neighboring states to get away with ignoring their constitutions or changing their constitutions to allow rulers to be presidents for life. When the United States allows Museveni to run for term after term after term in Uganda, no matter how good a leader he is, that sends a signal to neighboring states that the United States is only talking about limiting terms and only talking about respect for constitutions, but will not do anything about it that is particularly meaningful. And this has happened within the last year and a half in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi, in Congo-Brazzaville. For whatever reason, the United States' hypocrisy with regard to this makes it very difficult to have leverage. And I think that Mr. Kabila and those around him are aware that not all the threats that are made about leaving office are serious. And they believe that they can get away with this because they have seen their neighbors get away with this. So what should we do? I think that Western donors should take meaningful action. One way this could be done is by leveraging the support for the Congolese budget. Donors fund more than 50% of Congo's budget. Sorry? Portuguese. They're having a problem with the... Yeah? It's okay? It's okay? Tudo bem? Tudo bem? Okay. So that's the only Portuguese I know. Western donors need to start leveraging their support for the budget, to start saying, we will not fund your salaries for the civil service if you do not behave democratically, if you do not respect what your people want. In Africa, leaders need to affirm their own commitments to democracy and the rule of law. Otherwise, calls for Mr. Kabila to step down ring very hollow. So in sum, I am quite pessimistic about the short term in Congo, and I'm very worried for my friends there. But I will tell you that I am very optimistic about the long term. And that is because Congolese voters are maturing as their democracy grows. People do not fall for simple promises anymore about, if you vote for me, I will bring development, I will bring peace. They know that it's more complicated than that, and they are demanding more of their leaders. We have strong growth in protest movements in Congo, particularly among young people, and they are not afraid. They are not afraid to be arrested. They are not afraid to stand up for what they know is right. The vast majority of Congolese want and are demanding a united and peaceful Congo. They want prosperity. They want their leaders to be better. And because of that, that gives me hope. And I think that it will be difficult. I think the road ahead will be quite frightening. But ultimately, the path to success is clear. So thank you for listening.